back to our anime show. I am a green queen.
And I'm Binge Monster, wearing green.
Wow. And I'm not. You don't have a color in your name. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm just finishing eating lunch at 5:30 p.m. as we're recording this, which is on brand, on theme for today, especially given what we're going to talk about, right?
Which brings me to one of my favorite topics, but definitely Binge Monster's favorite topic of them all. Food. We are in a talk about food. We haven't talked about food in a long time on this podcast.
Have we ever talked about food on this podcast?
Oh my god, yes. We had a whole episode on Japanese lunch, remember?
Oh, we did.
We talked about bento, we talked
Totally.
about onigiri, we talked about a bunch of different things. Hanami, which I'm going to bring up again, to Cherry Blossom Festival, where they would bring the bento box, its origination. I think that's what it was called. I don't know. Fact check me on that one. But we're going to talk about food because have you ever watched an anime and just been like, you know what? I want that. I want that. It looks so good. There's something that the animators and these studios can do to food that just makes you be like, do I want 2D food right now? It looks magical, larger than life. I've never experienced anything like it in any other thing I've watched. I guess that's not true. Besides like literal commercials of food where I'm like, never wanted a Big Mac, but you're making it look phenomenal.
They do. They
make it look like. But okay, so I'm very excited for this, but please let the listeners tell the listeners why you're excited for this, because this is actually your idea.
It was my idea. I wanted to actually eat Japanese food. I was craving it, but more specifically, I really wanted to take something that I'd seen in anime and actually just go make it. Just like you said. I think we both are such foodies, and I cook a ton. I don't know if I can say you cook a ton, but I cook a ton, and I was like, there are certain things that I've generally, wanted to make for quite some time, and I got a chance to do that, and got a chance to talk about it on the podcast. So for me, it was like two birds, one stone. It just worked out really well. So when we discussed this, we're like, okay, why don't we make something from an anime? But we took it a step farther, and we said, let's like at least make one like appetizer, side dish, and then one entree. That way, it's not just like one thing, and we like really have to go all in. So I have not seen. I've intentionally, not looked at the pictures of the food that you made seriously, and I'm really excited to show you some of the stuff that I made and tell you some stories. But what did you make for your appetizer?
Yes. So I made Mitarashi Dango for my appetizer, and now, mind you, I am not a phenom cook, but I'm very good at baking. Baking makes sense to me. I'm pretty decent at that. So Mitarashi Dango was kind of the good mix of the both. So dango in and of itself is a very traditional Japanese dish. It first comes to us, I believe, in like the Meiji period or during like the 13th and 14th century. Like this goes back a long time. And so when I was looking this up, I was kind of like, like what is the origin of dango? And for those of you that are already wondering, I'm sure you've seen dango before. Maybe you just don't know the name. If this sounds unfamiliar to you, usually you can see it in anime and in a lot of like. There's actually an emoji dango that I neglected to remember until I started to put this together. Yes, but it's the dango that's it's basically a bamboo skewer, and then there's three little balls on it. One's pink, one's white, and one's green. Mm-hmm. So this is, I believe...
Is it always those colors?
So no, but that is a specific type of dango. So that's what they would call like Hanami dango, and it's usually brought out during Hanami festival. So when we're thinking like the sakura blossoms, etc., it's for that. And you can like flavor them. So I think I think now it's just mostly just artificial coloring, but like the green one could be like green tea or pardon me, matcha, or they had another one that it was traditionally something like buckwheat or something like that.
Buckwheat.
Uh, not buckwheat, but it was something. I might have it in my notes. Maybe I'll find it in here. But it was something I was very unfamiliar with.
Oh.
That would give it that green color. And then the pink could be sakura flavor. It could be like rose. It could be strawberry. It could be a bunch of different things. Like there's a bunch of stuff you can do with this because it's actually very easy to make, which I'll definitely get into. But this was kind of this came about, and it was more traditionally used as like offerings to shrines. Which I thought was really interesting. So there was a Japanese emperor again during like the 13th or 14th century that had some sort of experience where he was looking into water in his hands and started to see bubbles or something, and so that started to come about. Oh, I guess we must now offer these to the gods, because when you look at the dango, it was originally 5 different little balls to represent like the head, the body, the arms, the legs, etc., and that would be the offering. But it has since through time just become mostly 3. But like if you have a long bamboo skewer, make the longest dango you want, you know.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I was not prepared for such a significant, story behind Dango. I really wasn't.
It's I don't know, like I did not read further, I guess, into the details, but like
Yeah.
it said that this emperor was purifying their spirit, and in
Okay.
purifying their spirit had this visualization of the bubbles in their hands and so forth. And so that's how that came about. I urge you to do your own research, because that's that's the baseline research on this. But that was traditionally used for. But going back, so there's a couple different types. So there's hanami, which is I think the more known kind, with the pink, the white, and the green. The one that I made is Mitarashi Dango, which again is like pretty popular. It's like really popular street food in Japan, where it's just the sort of glutinous rice flour ball, but then it's really the star of the show being the glaze that you put on it. Okay,
Mm,
so then the glaze is more like a sweet soy,
syrup.
just syrupy glaze, yeah.
Mm.
And again, so making it is super, super easy as far as I guess today. I mean, like at the time, I think you had to make it with like rice flour and like a couple other like oil or things like that. But you can go to the store and you can just buy for like literally $1.99. I was shocked. A bag that where I could make this a couple times, like if I wanted to, of just glutinous rice flour. So
Mm-hmm.
all you do is follow the directions and you put the flour and water together, and it immediately starts to make like that pasty kind of substance. You form it into balls, and then you boil water, you drop it into the boiling water, and you just wait for it to float, and it's done. It's so easy.
That is so much easier than what I went through for mine. It actually drives me crazy. Okay.
I didn't mean to pick something truly so simple. But then that was it, because I think I was reading a couple different ingredients instructions, one of my recipes. I
Mm-hmm.
was reading a couple different recipes, and some of them were calling for like a mixture of this kind of flour and this kind of flour. So like I had 2 different flours, and then the last recipe I looked up was like, oh yeah, you only need that one. And I was like, okay. And then making the sauce, the Mitarashi sauce, was even easier. You just combine what is it? A little bit of cornstarch, soy
Uh-huh.
sauce, and sugar together. And you combine it, and then you heat it, you put it on in a pan on low heat, or you can microwave it. But I was like, all right, let me put it on a pan. Like, come on. This is an exercise that we're doing here. And you just heat it up until it's all like that thick consistency, and you drizzle it right on.
Wow.
It was so good too. It was so
Was
easy
it?
and so good. I'm like, this is definitely something where I'm like, I can imagine that, like, I would imagine, I'm inferring, I'm guessing, obviously I don't know, that most people in Japan can make this. It's so easy. And I'm like, this is a perfect thing that you could do with like your kids. Oh, we're going to the picnic. Let's make blah, 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 blah. There's an added step you could do, actually, that I forgot. Okay, so you make the balls. They float, they rise in the water. You drop them in ice. Pardon me. And then they were saying that once you put them on a skewer, had forgotten skewers, so I just kind of did it in a pan. You put them on the skewer, and then if you want to fry them a little bit, you just put them on a hot pan with some oil, and then they could get a little bit of like a harder texture.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Mine was so easy. I didn't mean to pick something so easy. but they're equal parts savory and sweet because you can also put I've seen a couple recipes where they put like a red bean paste, like a sweet red bean paste, they just lay it on top. But I'm like, I bet they dress these in all kinds of different ways with all kinds of different ingredients because you're basically just I mean the flour itself is like not sweet, but it's not sweet. So if you
Hmm.
want to really make it sweet, you can just add kind of anything you want. And the reason I wanted to make this was because I feel like I've seen it in so many anime, and the one that I noted the most is Demon Slayer because the I think it's Swordsmith Village arc, or at least it's the person that makes the swords. I think it's the person that makes Tanjiro's sword. He eats this at some point and like loves them, but he eats specifically the Mitarashi Dango. Whereas I feel like in a lot of like romance anime and other things like that, I see them eat the Hanami Dango, which again, arguably like more popular.
Hmm.
And then who is this person you were telling me from Naruto who
Oh,
eats it? I have the picture here and I forget.
Anko. Yeah,
Oh, Anko.
she's one of the adjudicators of the Chunin exam for the second test, which was the Forest of Death. And she's a Jonin and like used to be Orochimaru's student. Yeah, Anko's like favorite snack was dango.
Did
And
you have dango in Japan, or have you had it before? Like,
that's like,
what do you think
I,
about it?
I genuinely feel like I did. I don't fully remember it, which either means I was let down by it and chose to forget it, or I didn't eat it. But I find it difficult to imagine that I didn't seek it out when I went. If I will the next time I go to Japan, which hopefully will be this year. But I don't know if I tried it off the top of my head. We'd have to ask our mutual friend Janelle and see what she said because she I would have eaten it when she was there. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't remember.
I mean, it's like the thing about it is I remember the first time I had it, and it was something that I had bought from a convenience store, just being like, oh god, I see this everywhere and I
Mm-hmm.
want to try it. I think I actually got it like Tesso Life or something.
Mm.
And
Where did you
I
buy
liked
your
it.
ingredients from?
Oh, all the ingredients I bought at H Mart.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but I'm sure you can find glutinous rice flour at like any Asian grocery store like
Yeah.
outside of H Mart. I'm sure that's something that you can definitely
This
find.
this was a challenge for me because I just moved to a part of Queens which is heavily populated by like Russians, Ukrainians. There's a really large Jewish community here as well, so it was pretty difficult to find an Asian grocery store around me.
Yeah.
The closest thing that we have is this Korean mart down the road, which has some incredible popsicles that at another time we will talk about when we're not recording the podcast. But
Yes.
but they didn't have any of the things that I was looking for. Um,
No.
yeah, so it was So I guess I'll go next.
Yeah.
So I made anpan, which I have wanted to attempt to make for a really long time. Ironically, when you were talking about making um, this dango, you talked about being a baker but not a cook. I am a cook but not a baker. I am the complete opposite of you, and thought that this was a pretty straightforward thing to make. Um, this dessert snack was something that has stuck with me ever since I watched an incredibly special episode of Gintama where one of the Shinsengumi is on a stakeout observing this woman, and all he has to live on is anpan. And over the course of the episode, you slowly see him degrade into like complete shatters mentally, and begins to trickle in words, replacing everyday words with the word anpan because he's literally going crazy. And at the very end of the episode, it is the only word that he is capable of producing, and it is so fun. It is such an incredible like build of comedy. It's one of the many reasons I absolutely love Gintama, and I think it's still to this day by far the funniest anime of any series that I've ever watched. And yeah, I mean it's just kind of stuck with me. So I will tell you a little bit about the history of it because it's pretty interesting. The anpan bread was first created by a man named Yasube Kimura, who was a samurai that retired and became a baker. And he formed his bakery. This was in the late 1800s, right around the time when yeast was introduced into Japan. It really wasn't an ingredient that anybody really used at all. Even just bread in general was not really a thing, which is very different when you study like any country in Europe, comparatively speaking. But what's interesting about anpan is it was deemed two things that I think are of note. One, it was designated Japan's first soft bread. So not just like bread in general, but its first soft bread. And then second, and this is hopefully enough to really cement anpan's legacy in Japanese history. But in Japanese history books, anpan is referred to and considered to be one of the 7 tools for the opening of civilization, alongside newspapers, postal services, and gas lamps of Japan to the west. That is how important anpan as a snack is.
Anpan.
I was thoroughly impressed and happy to read that such a small little dessert could have such an important imprint on Japanese history. And it is tiny. Here, I actually have one right here. I still have them. I didn't eat them all because I made like 8 of them, and they're extremely rich. Sadly, I was playing video games while we were baking these, and I was playing Smash more specifically, and I was fighting someone that I just absolutely couldn't walk away from. So when the timer went off, I was like mid-fight, and so I ended up baking like 4 or 5 minutes longer than it was supposed to. So it's not supposed to be this dark. It didn't like burn, but it's definitely supposed to be lighter than what you see here. I'm just gonna put it up to this to the white background behind me just for reference.
That looks like a brownie.
It is dark. It is dark.
I'm kidding. I'm just teasing you.
But I did have a number of challenges acquiring all of the specific ingredients. Like I said, I could not find really an Asian grocery store around me. Now, granted, I live in Queens. There is no excuse. I could have hopped on the subway and gone maybe like 1 or 2 stops and found an Asian grocery store, but I just didn't. I made this last night. We had a really busy day yesterday, and I just figured I'd be like, oh, I don't need to go to a specialty store. There'll be something down the street, and there just wasn't. So this is a bun that is typically centered with a red bean paste, which is called a and red bean paste is a pretty common ingredient for a lot of different Japanese dishes. It's sweet but not too sweet. It's got a really kind of a tangy but not too tangy taste to it. Have you eaten
Mhm.
red bean paste before, or like anything with
I
red bean paste?
love red bean
Yeah.
paste. I've had it in like the waffle fish that they make, like
Oh,
a
yeah.
warm like waffle fish. I forget the name of that, but with the red bean
Takoyaki
paste.
something. I don't.
Takoyaki
Takoyaki? Yeah,
is the
that's the
octopus
octopus.
ball, but you're
But
not wrong. It's
it's
something like
close.
that.
It's close to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Taiyaki?
I
No.
actually I've been to Kura Sushi, which is like conveyor belt sushi chain, and
Mm-hmm.
they make a dessert that's like one of those. It's like a pretty decent sized fish waffle with the red bean paste in it, and then
Mm-hmm.
just a good healthy scoop of vanilla ice cream that's so milky and rich and wonderful. It's very good.
Mm.
Yeah.
So one of the ingredients, a little bit of a cardinal sin here. One of the
Uh-huh.
ingredients I couldn't find was red bean paste, which was 90% of making an unbun. So
Is
I
that
had
something you is that something you can't also just make?
it is. It is. But
But
I
is
don't
it like
but I think you need like azuki beans. Like you can't just get like any red bean and just make the paste.
do
Like I
it?
think it's a yeah. In fact, I in fact when I went to the grocery store, I went to the Korean grocery store that I mentioned. I said, "Do you have red bean paste?" And they said, "Yeah, red beans in a can, right over there." And I walked over there and I was like, "I wonder if she thought I meant kidney beans," and she did, and it was kidney beans. It was not red beans, the red beans that I
Ah.
needed. So yeah, so you can't just use any, but I did get kind of lucky because it's the same color and similar consistency. I found guava paste, which was I was
Oh.
like, you know what? That's not what typically goes in an ampon, but it's close enough for the amount of
Yeah.
time I have left to be able to make this because um well, in general, I was gonna go. I actually, when I realized that I couldn't find it, I was gonna go, but I had so many things to do yesterday, and I realized that this stupid recipe calls for like 4 hours of resting, like 2 hours here, 2 hours there at different steps.
Oh.
So there was like so many resting hours, and I was like, I have things to do today, so I couldn't go actually get it, but it ended up being really good with the guava paste anyway. Um,
Mm.
so my wife and I turned this into a little bit of an activity. I pretty much started making this from kind of the moment I woke up. So when you see the pictures here or wherever she puts it, you're gonna see that I look a little rough because I kind of just woke up and started rolling the dough so I could get the first 2 hours locked away while I went to go get the other ingredients. um, but
I
it was
didn't.
super fun. Now, one of the things that had me a little worried is after the dough rose or whatever it's called, whatever you bakers call it.
Yes. Yes. No,
Um,
that's it. Yeah.
the when we actually started to shape the bun around the red bean paste, because you just kind of like pinch it at the top and you mold it and flip it. As you can
Mm.
see in the picture, it it looked like the red bean paste on some of them was gonna pop through, like we maybe put a little too much.
Oh.
Um, and so we were a little worried that after we put it in the oven that it was gonna that it was gonna pop or something. And thankfully
Oh
it didn't.
no.
No, thankfully it didn't, and it ended up being okay. Um, we did remember a little late to toast the sesame seeds, so we didn't put toasted sesame seeds. We just put regular sesame seeds, but nonetheless, it was really good. And we tried it. Ended up tasting still really good. Obviously, the recipe doesn't call for guava paste, but it was still, really tasty. And yeah, no complaints.
It looks so cute. What are the steps? So you combine and make the flour or the dough and then it rests? And
Yeah,
then you put the paste and then it rests? Is that the or
yeah. So we
no?
made like a milk bread dough with milk and oh my god, uh, heavy whipping cream and some
Oh, yeah.
sugar. Well, first we
Yeah.
like made that mixture of milk and heavy whipping cream kind of warm, and then we put the sugar in and let the sugar melt into that cream mixture.
Mhm.
And then we
Mhm.
mixed in the dough and added a little bit of salt and created the dough, put it in the bowl, let it rise for like 2 hours, and then after that we made eight little balls and let those rise again,
Oh,
and then we
oh.
split them, added the red bean paste in, molded it again, let it rest for a little bit, and then put it into the oven for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
This looks so good, Binge Monster. And it's honestly like, I mean, I'm sure with these kinds of things, if you went to an anpan shop, they have like tons of different things, you know? I would bet that if you walked through Japan today and went to like a bakery, they would have anpan with a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah,
Red bean, guava. They love their black sesame over there too. They love a sweet black
they do.
sesame.
Yeah, we didn't have any black sesame, so we were just gonna toast it. But
Oh,
I know it's
fine.
not the same thing, but we're gonna get close. Yeah. So it was fun though. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and for those of you who have never watched Gintama, it is definitely on the longer side. But if you want to enjoy just a really funny episode, I don't even really think you need to know anything about the series other than like the Shinsengumi were a part of like the police force. And go watch that episode. It's I don't know the number exact episode, but if you look up like the Anpan episode in Gintama, you'll definitely find it. It's
Yeah, Binge Monster sent me just that clip of just that moment. And I'll tell you, it left me with my jaw on the floor. I was like, what is this? I joked. I was like, this feels like something I have to like send to 10 friends or else I'm going to be like have a curse on me for the rest of my life. It was definitely fun. It was definitely good. Definitely watched Gintama.
so. What did you make for your entree?
My entree. So what's funny is my appetizer wound up being so easy, but I specifically chose something for my entree that I knew would be easy because I'm not a great cook, and I also was like kind of running around this week, and I knew I had to do this at my brother and sister's. I was watching their dog. It was a whole thing. So I was like, I don't know what's gonna be where. So like, let me just pick something that I know is like a lot of people eat this in this specific way and it's easy on purpose. So I picked Japanese curry, which is sort of an umbrella term for lots of different things. So like Japanese curry, you've probably in a sense had before. It's kind of like a stew. Like we always made like a very Irish stew. So that's why I was like, this feels like something that I am not only going to really enjoy, but it's going to have like a little bit of different flavors that I also really like. So when we're talking about Japanese curry, I mean it's so a part of the culture now, but Japanese, curry in and of itself, um, it wasn't really a dish that was brought into Japan until like 1868, 1880 or so forth. Again, it says during the Meiji Restoration because this is when uh, the British, who I think had already started like getting curry from India and so forth, they had basically brought this over and introduced curry to Japan. And then it just kind of it unfolded or unraveled. People make it more and more now, and it's definitely taken on its own like identity. I would say in Japanese culture, Japanese curry is a little bit more, generally speaking, like a little bit more sweeter. So it still has like that curry spice, but it definitely still has a little bit of like sweetness to it. And like the famous curry to have in Japan is katsu curry, which is basically just like the fried chicken.
Pork.
Katsu's chicken or katsu's pork? Okay. The fried with like the very very amazing breaded crusty outside of pork, pardon me. Just over curry and rice. And that's basically what it is. So you're making a stew. And then you're putting it over, it can be put over rice, it could be put over like udon noodle. It's just like so versatile. But like the most popular one is definitely like katsu curry. And I actually want to try that. I've never had katsu curry before, but I've had plenty of curry dishes because my sister-in-law is Indian and obviously have eaten what her parents make, what she makes, etc. But I would actually really like to try it like this. They also make curry stuffed buns, funny enough, as like a snack. They make curry
Now
stuffed
that you say
buns.
this, like I'm really questioning. I think I'm wrong. I think it can be either pork or chicken, but I think it's mostly chicken. You were right. Like I think I was
No,
wrong.
no, 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 no. So, pardon me. So, curry in and of itself, to your point, it's very diverse. So it could be pork, it could be chicken. I think there's like in some region of Japan they make it like with scallops and like that's their specialty. Like this, it's a very very versatile dish.
Hmm.
Traditionally, I think the I don't know, I can't remember what katsu is. I think katsu is pork, but I don't know. I made mine with a mixed vegetables, which are just usually you can make it with onions, carrots, and potatoes. I chose all three. It was like, let's do onions, let's do carrots and potatoes. But I diced my onions. I don't know if I was supposed to do that, but I left like my potatoes in, they were supposed to be cubed, but I got nervous that they weren't going to cook enough, so I made them a little bit smaller than a cube, I would say, a little bit more of like a slice, kind of like half an inch ish, and like in half and so forth. That will be key to the outcome of my curry, by the way, the way that I cut the potatoes and the care and the concern I had with making sure that they were cooked. But it's a lot of prep work, so it kind of does feel like I'm cooking. You know, like you have to like get the carrots ready, chop them up. You chop up the potato. You know, if you have a cut of beef, pardon me, I used beef. You know, you do that, but I had already got cubed ones. You know, you're cutting the onion, like so. It's a lot of prep work just to prepare all of the ingredients. And so basically, the recipe, I got like the golden curry cubes. There is a way to make, of course, your own, and that is usually made by like frying together curry powder, flour, and oil, and then kind of like what other ingredients you want. And then they say they make it into a roux, which I think like ROUX, which is the cube, I believe.
Roux.
Right? A roux? Oh, thank you. So I just got the golden curry standard. You can find this almost anywhere. Like it's very very accessible in the US, and then of course in Japan I'm sure it's very accessible. But you prepare all your stuff, you put it in a pan, you like fry it a little bit with some oil, maybe other seasonings, whatever. You once you feel like that's sufficient, you pour a bunch of water in, and I made it so it at least covered my stuff. I was like, I want all the ingredients covered, and then you just boil it. Well, you boil it and then you bring it to a quote simmer for like 15 minutes or so. I did mine a little longer again because I'm afraid that my potato wouldn't cook and my meat wouldn't cook, which are my two biggest gripes with cooking, which is why I'm not a good cook because I'm always afraid that all my food is raw. After that happens, then you add in the cubes that give it the flavor. It starts to make a sauce, and then you could kind of like let that simmer until it thickens a little bit, until everything's kind of dissolved and so forth, and then it's just in that pot, and then you just pour it over rice and you ladle it on, or over noodles or whatever. We did over rice. And mine, it looks good. I think it looks good, and it was good, but because of my fear of undercooking the potato, I in fact think I overcooked them. So when I started to really put the seasoning in and stir, I could start to see that my potatoes were really breaking up a little bit more than I wanted them to, which I
Mm.
think then like lightened the color of my dish, which I didn't like. It still looks good, but it
It
looks
does look
like
good.
a little, it looks lighter than it wasn't what I wanted it to be, you know?
I think it looks
Like
tasty.
display wise. But it was good. I mean, and you know, everything I made, Cheeks also ate, and he is the cook between us. He's very, very gifted. Like he just gets this. I even had to ask him a little bit, like, do you think this is okay? Like, do you think I'm doing it right? And he was like, yeah, it's great. Like, keep at it. You're good.
I think you're being so hard on yourself for the color. Like I've had some really questionable, murky brown Japanese curry at Japanese restaurants where you look at it and you go, I don't know about this specific curry, and it ends up being really good. I think it
Mm-hmm.
looks delicious. Was it tasty?
Oh,
Did you enjoy it?
it was good. I really did enjoy it. And I seasoned my beef a little bit before I put
Sure.
it in. And but I really let the ingredients speak for themselves, and I really did enjoy it. I really did enjoy it. Again, I'm a little bit picky, and I'm because I'm also, this is my first time having Japanese curry, so then I was like, I really had an
Oh, really?
idea and had
You
it.
hadn't had it like before at a different restaurant before trying
No,
this?
no,
Oh,
I've
interesting.
never had Japanese curry. I've had curry, but never Japanese curry.
Yeah, but it's so different. It's so the Japanese curry tastes fundamentally different. So if you're like worried because it doesn't taste like Indian curry, which you've probably had many times, you're totally fine. It's not even close.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like the thing is, so like I looked up photos obviously and I looked up inspiration because I can't actually remember seeing this in an anime, but I've heard it talked about in anime before. It's like, "Oh, let's make some curry," like whatever. I think in
Yeah.
like Yamada-kun she makes curry for him at some point and like packs it up in a lunch. But I had never like seen it, but I knew that it was like such a big staple. I had a feeling it would be easy because I've seen golden curry. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna prepare ingredients and then throw the seasoning in and it'll be good, which
Yeah.
was. Um, but this photo I saw, they make Japanese curry in Doraemon,
Hmm.
and the little like I don't know blue cat with the bell or something, and it looks so good in this photo. It looks so good. They make it in a couple different like Doraemon stuff. They make it in One Piece. And then it's a big thing in Haikyuu too because it's Kageyama's favorite meal.
Mm.
He loves pork curry. He with a fried egg on top. That's his thing. And even they have these chips. I forget what they're called now that I'm looking at it. I didn't write down the name here and I cannot read Japanese that well. But it's a specific type of like cracker or chip that are seasoned to taste like something. So there's one that's seasoned to taste like pork curry with a fried egg on top. And I guess when Haikyuu was coming out week to week, they had done a collaboration with this brand and they had put the boys' faces on the packaging and it was like, okay, there's two different kinds. Oh, it's a mystery. Which one are you gonna get? And when you open it up, you're gonna get a Haikyuu sticker. So I was like, it's just so ingrained in the culture. Um, and something that you were even talking about when I was saying I think I'm gonna make this, um, was, and I think this lends to how easy it is to make. Like it is kind of like a dish you can make for a large group of people real quick.
Hmm.
So I think that that's why the tie with Haikyuu, and we've probably again heard of it mentioned in other anime before. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It was fun. I would like to have real Japanese curry from like a real Japanese restaurant or in Japan itself.
Totally.
I don't know.
This
Where
is
have you had
understandable.
it?
I've had it in Japan. I've had it at a lot of like ramen restaurants too. It's a decently common either side or appetizer, or I mean, there are entrees for it as well. But yeah, I've had it a couple different places. I had it in Nepal, actually, at a very good Japanese restaurant in Kathmandu. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I see it uh, as something that the managers for most sports teams and most sports animes tend to make. I think for exactly the reason that you just said. I think some people just take cutting up all the onions and another the potatoes and another the carrots, and then they work together on the rice and they work together on the meat, and then they just come together and kind of just make it. So it seems like a pretty good thing to make as a group when you can have different stations of people working on different things, and
Mm.
makes sense that
Yeah, that's actually a great point because I think also when we did the episode about Japanese lunch and there are certain, all the kids kind of have a different role. Some do help with preparing the food. I'm like, I bet this is something they have a lot of times in their lunch.
I'm sure I'd be pretty confident about that.
Okay, now I want to hear about your entree. I'm ready for you to absolutely wow us because this is, I'm going to be honest, I read what you made and what is that?
So I ended up making something that came from a very specific episode from a very specific anime. This is not a traditional Japanese entree in any sense. I made apple risotto,
Hmm.
and the inspiration behind choosing this was that by far, my favorite food anime is Shokugeki no Soma. In English, it's called Food Wars. Um, it's something that I had a difficult, or I should say, a understandingly difficult time convincing some of my peers to give it a chance because it is notoriously etchy. Um, or for those who are somewhat new to anime terminology, it is notoriously fan servicey to the truly like edge of what is okay to be on television, uh, many times. But it is such a good show. It is such a good show, and they make food look so good. Every single week, an episode of this anime came out. I had to be eating while I watched. Otherwise, I left an episode frantically hungry. And the main character does a really great job making cooking look fun. Uh, so there is an episode in the first season, I believe it's the 16th episode of Shokugeki no Soma, where he's battling his father. And for quick context, his father is a chef, a world-renowned chef, one of the best of the best. He didn't really know it growing up, but he kind of learns that as he goes through a high school version of a culinary show where the world's best up-and-coming chefs who are under the age of 18 attend this institution to become like the chefs of the world. And in his dorm, there are a bunch of people who are waking up for the day, and he has like a cook-off with his father who comes to visit him at the school, um, who he discovers is a former alumni of the school as he's there, and they have a food battle or a food war, and that's why it's called Food Wars, because and many of the episodes there are all these like cooking challenges that have really high stakes, where if you lose, sometimes you get kicked out of the school, or you lose a lot of points, or you lose your favorite chef knife or whatever.
Oh.
And he made this in a competition to beat, not only beat his father, but more importantly to create kind of like a refreshing breakfast dish. That was the challenge that they focused this particular battle around. The goal was to create something that was both nutritious but also revitalize them. For some, they had already kind of, I believe, if I remember correctly, they had like gone out to work in the garden, so they were a little bit like they were pretty hungry and had expended a lot of energy. For others, they had a really long day the previous day, so the goal was to kind of create this like revitalizing breakfast using whatever ingredients were still left in the kitchen. It wasn't like a fully loaded kitchen where they could make anything. Admittedly, risotto, or more specifically, apple risotto, not being a Japanese dish, um, this is not something that you would typically see in another anime. Not something that I've ever seen in another anime. And risotto not being a Japanese dish, there's not a lot of history of it in Japan for that very reason. Um, I can tell you that really quickly, the history of risotto can be traced back to the 16th century in northern Italy. Um, its origins are tied to like the history of rice in Italy, because it was uh, really not an ingredient that was really used in Italian cuisine before that. The Arab uh, um, countries and kingdoms were the ones to kind
Mm.
of bring it over to Italy during the Middle Ages. And it was an ideal place for growing kind of shorter grain rice because it was really humid. So eventually it was incorporated into a lot of the dishes made in Italy. It became a staple in a lot of the
Yeah.
northern Italian areas. Um, Specifically, if I remember, like Milan, which was at one point under Spanish rule, um, it was particularly popular. And um, risotto is known as a dish that depends on slow cooking techniques. Whereas like some other things, like you put on really high heat, you make quickly like a fried rice in a wok. It's really kind of the opposite for this particular rice dish, where you really want to take advantage of having the rice, and more specifically, it's a type of rice that absorbs liquids really really slowly. Like other rice can absorb really quickly, and this you want to use something called arborio rice. It's a it's the most expensive rice you can buy because it's really used for risotto, but it's a shorter
Yeah.
grain, slower to absorb grain of rice. And the key to it is to use a really good white wine, to use typically you would make it with chicken broth or stock that either you make from scratch or you can buy from the store, and slowly you incorporate it into the rice, and just continue to stir it for sometimes upwards of an hour, just slowly pouring and waiting for the rice to completely absorb or for the underlying liquid to kind of evaporate. And then as soon as that happens, you add in just a little bit more. And over time, it really embraces the richness and the flavor of whatever you use. So it ends up just being really delicious. And I happen to love risotto in general. But I make risotto, I don't know, maybe like once or twice every other month or something, because my wife and I really love it, especially like with mushrooms. Um, but I'd never made it with apple. It's like it's like a weird concept. It's kind of like people who
Yeah.
enjoy guacamole that sometimes will add in like a pomegranate seeds or like a interesting fruit. Like it's not
Uh-huh.
immediately what comes to my mind, but if you make a mango salsa, like I'll try it. You know, like depending on if
Yeah.
it's hot outside or I'm willing to like dabble, but I'd never
Mm.
heard or made apple risotto specifically. And what's cool
No.
about this is it really changes the game for how you typically approach making risotto. Normally, like I said, you do it with chicken stock. In this recipe, you cook the rice with apple juice. And I was a little bit worried
Whoa.
about how I was a little bit worried about how sweet this was going to be because I was making it
Yeah.
for dinner. And yes, this was like a breakfast thing where I think people's palate is a little bit more open to something sweet. You kind of in the morning, right? With like, I don't know, we eat like cereal and things like that that are like really sweet in the morning.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit worried about that. So I actually did like 3/4 apple juice, 1/4 chicken stock, just because I wanted to balance it out a little bit. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other thing that kind of is there to sort of balance out that sweetness that Soma in the show added in was bacon. I love bacon. So
Mm.
we threw some bacon in the air fryer, crumbled it up, and put it in. And at the end, the recipe in the show didn't call for Parmesan, but it just, or mushrooms for that matter, but it just felt weird eating risotto without mushrooms and Parmesan. So we grated some Parmesan, put it over, and added in some mushrooms and put them in as well. Just felt wrong not eating risotto with mushrooms. Um,
Yeah.
so that's how we made it, and it took quite a while um, for reasons that I've already mentioned because it is a slow cooking kind of a recipe. But also, I was battling with the anpan and trying to make sure that that was all good. And it wasn't technically very difficult to make the anpan, but I was so stressed because I'm not a baker that it really took all of my focus.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
like not able to really enjoy making the apple risotto. Um, but the risotto I think came out really well. It was quite balanced. It wasn't too sweet. It was a little more sweet than I would normally want a risotto, but I think for like a breakfast, it
Mm.
makes sense. Like I actually had it for breakfast this morning and really enjoyed it. Somehow it was even saltier this morning after a night in the fridge, so I was appreciative of that as well. And I wasn't bothered by the diced apples in it. I thought I would be, but I really wasn't.
Oh, that's what
So
I was just gonna ask you. I was gonna ask. I'm looking at it. This is pieces of apple.
yeah, so I cut up half of a Honeycrisp apple into tiny, tiny cubes, and then I just added them in, and
Mm.
that's what made it last night. I think even more sweet, because I think the rice definitely did a good job of absorbing the apple juice, and that wasn't too sweet. But as soon as I added those apples in, um, it changed the whole flavor profile of the risotto. So yeah, really
Interesting. Do
enjoyed
you
it.
have to peel the apples, or you're throwing it
I
in with
peeled
apple
it.
skin?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he peeled it in the show, so I did that as well.
Mm.
I ate the peel because I love Honeycrisp apples, like personally. So I didn't throw them to waste or anything. You don't like them?
No, it was just like I don't know. I was caught off that you distinctively went, I ate them, don't worry.
Well, because I don't know. Like normally when you peel things, you just throw them away as scraps,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I've ever eaten peeled like anything. But last night I was like, this is an expensive apple. I'm gonna eat these. Like, and I like it.
It's so funny. I wonder what would have happened if you had like put those in the air fryer. If you could have had like a little apple,
Oh, that's a good
like
idea.
yeah.
That would have been a
Well,
good
when you make this again,
idea. Yeah, I'd probably make it with a lot less apple. though.
Oh, really? Even half of an apple you feel like is too much?
Well, I think probably if it had been a normal size apple, it would have been fine. But Honeycrisps tend to be a little bit bigger of an apple, so half of that was probably closer to 3/4 of a typical apple size. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what did it. But um, yeah, probably a little less of that. But it was
You
good.
know what's so funny? I love because I love making apple pie. I haven't made an apple pie in a long time, and I totally should. You kind of inspired me to do that. But like when the apples are to get cooked, and then like and you put it with the sort of sweet
mm.
glaze, it just congeals together, and the bite of that sweet apple is so good. So I'm so curious what this tastes like.
I wish I could have saved some for you because I'm going to see you in a couple of days. But I
I
ate all this morning for breakfast. The irony was,
no.
I was telling when I was explaining why I wanted to choose this dish for our episode today. I was, well, I have to make something from Shokugeki no Soma. I don't know what entree I'm going to make, but I have to
Mhm.
make something from that because it just would feel weird doing an episode on anime food without doing something from there. And I was, and this was a dish I felt wasn't going to be particularly difficult, like to make because I know how to make risotto. It was just the difference of using apple juice and cut up apples. It wasn't terribly different. But I told her about the episode, and she goes, "Oh, did he win?" And I was like, "No, this dish actually lost to his father." And I don't
Ugh.
remember what he made, but so she's like, "So you picked like the loser plate? Like, why did you make what he made?" And it's like what he made was 10 times more complicated. It was like a seafood broth ramen for breakfast or something. I don't know, but it was apparently like really light, and everybody preferred it over this whatever. Um, so yeah, that was the story of my apple risotto.
You picked two things that were so complicated, and I picked two things that were so easy. So we really got y'all covered. If you want to go on like an excursion and like do that, you can. Or if you would like the fast, nice, wholesome, straight to the point, you can do my recipes.
I was really lucky though. There's a guy on Reddit who's already made recipes for every single dish that was ever created on Shokugeki no Soma. So it made my
Oh
job
wow.
20 times easier because I didn't have to go back and watch the episode to figure out exactly how he made it. Um, so
That's super cool. That person should get paid.
yeah, for sure.
Like I hope they make money.
Yeah, exactly. And with that, that was our episode on making anime food from anime. I'm a binge monster.
And I'm a green queen.